Could please make your way to your seats. We are going to begin the evening with a video that was put together by some of Vince's biggest fans. So please sit back and relax and enjoy the video while we get the final preparations for the event tonight. Thanks.
Hi, my name is Beth, and I'm a Vince Flynn fan, maybe even a fanatic. I've loved Vince's books since the beginning, since Term Limits, and especially since he introduced us to Mitch Rapp. The world needs a Mitch Rapp, and I'm pretty sure there's a few out there. Anyway, the main thing I wanted to say, though, was about how much it meant to my dad. My dad was an athlete. He was a triathlete, kind of like Mitch. You know, not Iron Man in Hawaii, but you know, he biked, he swam, he ran, he kayaked, he mountain biked. Anything he could do that was outdoorsy, he did it. He was not one to kind of sit still, so when he was diagnosed with cancer and then had to go through the treatments and everything, his world changed, and I handed him the book Term Limits, and he kind of rolled his eyes and was like, I don't like to read. Well, he started liking to read. He read Term Limits, he asked where's the next one, and then he asked for the next book. And especially once he met Mitch Rapp, he was hooked, and it really gave him something to look forward to every day as he was going through treatments. So I just wanted to say how much Vince meant to my dad, and how much you, Vince's family and friends, mean to all of us, because without you, we know that Vince wouldn't be able to do what he did. He always thanked you and always said how much it meant to have y'all's support. So thank you for sharing such a wonderful man with us. And we all love him and miss him. And we are very thankful that Kyle Mills is carrying the torch and keeping Mitch Rapp true to being Mitch. But we do miss Vince.
Hi everybody, welcome to the event. 3 words that impact my life on a daily basis and that I learned from Vince. Keep the faith. It has so much meaning, it has so much resonance in all our lives nowadays. And I learned that from Vince, from his writing, from his character. Not just the Mitch Rapp character, but from his character as a human being. So giving of himself, such a fighter, such an amazing person. How not to be impacted by somebody like Vince. As a fan, it's my turn to return the favor for everything that he has done for me. My job now is to continue the legacy, to spread the word, to show everybody who he was, to thank him on a daily basis through what I do as a human being, to love and to cherish those around me, to love my country, to be a patriot. That's who Vince was, and that's who he will continue to be for me and for many of his fans. Thank you, Vince. And thank you, Kyle Mills and the rest of the team, for allowing us to rejoice and have one more Mitch adventure to hop on and enjoy. You guys have done an amazing job, and thank you for allowing us to continue to honor Vince and continue his legacy.
Hi, my name is Slaven Tomasi. I'm a Mitch Rapp ambassador from Los Angeles, California. I first got introduced to Vince Flynn when I was deployed overseas with the United States Marine Corps. I just want to say thank you to Vince for helping me with his books to deal with the stress of being overseas in the combat zone. If I could say anything to him, it would be that reading his books over and over again has been such a privilege. Thank you for giving us Mitch Rapp. You will forever be remembered as the best of the best amongst authors. Again, thank you, and rest in peace.
I'm Stephanie Janicek, and I started reading Vince's books in 2007 after we moved to Florida, and my husband was in Afghanistan. I was looking for something to do, and the books have been recommended by friends of mine, so I grabbed a few titles, and I got hooked. I'm a history major and an English minor, and themes like heroism, the struggle, commitment, faith, patriotism, right versus wrong, all mean something to me, and they're sadly lacking in our culture. I found Vince's books to be the things that brought those ideas back. We have our own heroes. We have real heroes. Chris Kyle, Marcus Luttrell, Dakota Meyer, and everybody else who served in Afghanistan or Iraq, and all of our intelligence officers that are still doing their jobs. But a culture needs fictional heroes, and Mitch Rapp, I look at as probably the greatest of all of them. He stands out as someone who is determined to do the right thing no matter what it takes. And I think that's something that the culture needs. And not just in real life. And Vince could say things through Mitch that you can't say in a nonfiction book, that you can't say on the floor of the House or the Senate. And people do feel these things. They're just either too afraid to say them, they're too politically correct to say them, or if they do, and if they hear someone say these things, they get upset. And reality is supposed to upset you. And that's one of the things I loved about Vince's writing and about Vince himself, is that he kept everything real, reality. And those are the reasons why I loved his books, and I became a huge fan, and I still miss him with all my heart. And I'm so glad that Kyle Mills has taken over. We'll have Mitch forever due to Vince's writing and Kyle keeping the flame. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Chris Miller, and I just wanted to say good evening and welcome to Vince's family and friends. And I never knew or met the man, but I read enough of his books to feel like I was a friend of his. And I'm sorry for your loss, but having gained a greater man. Vince was a great part of my life from the books itself. I'm in the United States Navy. I'm a submariner. Work on ballistic missile submarines. And the first couple of years were pretty difficult for me out to sea and adjusting to life as a sailor. So I took to reading to help pass the time and get my mind off work and whatnot while we were deployed. And I took to Vince's books on a recommendation from a friend. And then they helped carry me through the last 3 years on the boat and get me through those times. So if it wouldn't have been for Mitch and Irene and Anna and all those people that were in his stories, it would have been a lot more difficult in life out to sea. But Vince provided me with an escape to enjoy something that I didn't get in everyday life. So I appreciate being able to be a part of this, and I hope you all enjoy your evening. Thank you.
Now, if I could ask you all to please rise, we're going to have a presentation of the colors and recite the pledge once it gets to the front. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. You may take your seats. Thank you. Good evening and welcome to St. Thomas Academy, home of the cadets. I'm Matthew Mose, a 1990 alumnus of this institution, and I have the privilege of serving this community as the school's headmaster. For 130 years, 50 years on campus here in Mendota Heights, St. Thomas Academy has helped form generations of young men. As the only all-male Catholic military college preparatory high school in Minnesota, our students experience an education unlike any other available, one that fully develops the young men we serve physically, mentally, and spiritually, rooted in a Catholic community shared for a lifetime. Our graduates become pillars in their community, leaders in their professions, committed husbands and fathers, all in service to the greater good. Tonight, we gather to celebrate the legacy of Vince Flynn, a 1984 alumnus of this school. For those of you who have known Vince or followed his career for a long time, you know that this institution was extremely important to him. Otherwise, he would not have given his time, treasure, and talent to co-chair the campaign that ultimately led to the completion of this building bearing his name. We are proud to call Vince Flynn one of our sons, one of our brothers, and it is an honor for us to help celebrate the release of The Survivor, the 14th Mitch Rapp novel, completed by a distinguished author in his own right, Kyle Mills. Before I conclude, I wanted to recognize some special guests and take a moment to offer my thanks. First, to Lisa, Dane, Ingrid, and Anna. Thank you for asking us to be a part of this event. I never had the chance to meet Vince, but all one has to do is look around this arena to know that he touched the lives of so many. To Terry and Kathy and the entire Flynn family, you have all had a tremendous impact on this school and community. My hope is that we have honored your sons and brothers' legacy well tonight. To Vince's closest friends and colleagues, thank you for joining us tonight for this special celebration. With this amazing setup, it may be easy to forget that we here at the Academy are first and foremost educators, with hundreds of boys to teach every day. An event of this magnitude could not have happened without the tireless efforts of many people who have worked very long hours to make it a success. My advancement and communication staff here at STA, the volunteers from the Mothers and Fathers Clubs, the staff at Simon & Schuster, particularly David Brown, Once Upon a Crime Books, and the Harmar Barnes & Noble. Thank you to each of you for your contributions to this event. It is now my honor to introduce you to our host tonight, Mr. Frank Vascellaro. Frank is an anchor at WCCO-TV and a longtime friend of Vince and Lisa. We are also proud to call him and his lovely wife Amelia parents in our community. Please welcome Mr. Frank Vascellaro.
Matt, thank you. Good evening, everyone. Let's start with some really, really good news. We did a story tonight at 6 o'clock that featured Kyle Mills and Tim Flynn, and it was about the book, the release tonight, and this big gathering that you're all part of. And I'm really, really happy to tell you that The Survivor was released at midnight, and right now it is #2 on the Barnes & Noble bestseller list. Yeah, that's really cool. So thank you for all of your support. I met Vince Flynn the same night that I met Amelia, which is really, really weird. So I met Vince first, and then I met Amelia a little bit later, And I liked them both immediately. I was really, really drawn to both of them. And we hung out independently for quite a while. And then one night I was at, this is probably about 9 months after I met Amelia, I was at a Vikings exhibition game. It was a Saturday night. And into this booth walks this beautiful blonde. So I went and spoke to her to make sure that she was normal, decent, and a good person. And then I immediately called Vince Flynn and I said, "You've got to get down here immediately." And he had some excuse, but I said, "No, you don't understand. You've got to get down here immediately." And within half an hour, he met Lisa Flynn, who was not Lisa Flynn at the time. But he met Lisa. Amelia showed up. We went out on our first big double date. So I've got all these weird connections to Lisa and Vince. And the best part is that after that, we got to go through all the ups and downs of life that the good Lord provides us together. And it has been wonderful. So anyway, I promise you tonight, in the spirit of Vince, that we will really keep the evening moving. Vince and I attended a lot of events together, and Vince would always speak his mind, so he would love to critique the host. Why did he do that? I don't like my chicken. His jokes were bad. We need to keep things moving. So I promise you, in the spirit of Vince Flynn, we'll try to keep this interesting. We'll try to keep it moving. We've set up the evening in three kind of blocks or sections. Section 1 is a very special surprise guest we have for you. Section 2 is a literary panel that we put together for you. And Section 3 is a family and friends panel. And the best thing for you is that we have a question and answer period with all of this. So I do not think, knowing Vince and anyone that knows him, I think you would agree he would want the aura of a Lutheran church basement event this evening. I think Vince would much more appreciate the feel of a Catholic gym with a full bar. And I think there is a bar after the event. So that, of course, means to you, yes, don't be shy. Make sure that we can hear you when you answer your questions, and speak up, and please ask what's on your mind, because this is a really unique setting and opportunity. So, ladies and gentlemen, to our first guest. You know, I think, I was thinking about the introduction for this person, and I actually think that you reach a point in your career where you really don't need to be introduced with any kind of bio or resume. In fact, I think all I really need to do is to say two simple words to showcase who this person is, his accomplishments, and his career. Ladies and gentlemen, Rush Limbaugh.
Thank you all very much.
Welcome, Rush. Great to see you. Have a seat. How cool is this?
Let me shake your hand.
My pleasure.
Big time TV media guy.
Oh, yeah. Mainstream media. Make sure we...
Drive by me.
Drive by, excuse me. Why... I mean, the first thing I thought of, I was listening to your show this afternoon. Why is it so important? Why did you want to be here? It's a huge effort. You did your show live today. You got on a plane, and here you are.
Oh, this is. I was asked to be here, and I was honored to be included. Vince Flynn. I don't know actually where to start and where to stop with the assessment of his character and his nature as a human being, as a man, a father, a brother, a husband. I've never met anybody that I would consider to be more reliable and more solid, trustworthy, selfless than Vince Flynn. And unlike everybody else, I discovered him via his novels. And I forget who it was that recommended the first Mitch Rapp book that I read, but I read it and I was just blown away, and I went on the radio and started talking about it effusively. And the different thing about Vince is that he tracked me down. He did his best to find me just to say thanks. And I was, folks, he was such a great writer. I was flattered, I was thrilled, I was honored that he tried to reach me to say thanks. I didn't meet him for a few years. It was just email correspondence. The first time I actually met Vince was in Hollywood, just doing my radio show out there for a couple of weeks, and I'd arranged a set visit to the TV show 24. And I didn't know that at the time Vince had been hired by the writers and the producers there to be a consultant. I think it was season forget which 4 or 5, but I walked in and you should have seen this. He jumped out of his chair and came over to greet me as though I was the most important person in the room, smiling and beaming. And it was sort of a mutual admiration because I didn't know he was going to be there and I was excited to meet him. You know, folks, I don't know if you've met famous people in your life or celebrities, and most of the time they're not who you want them to be. Many of them are, but many of them aren't. Vince was everything you would want somebody of his stature and his achievement, his accomplishment to be. And we became extremely close friends, sharing weekends together with families and so forth around the country. And I cherish the amount of time I had when we got to know him. I once asked him about Mitch Rapp. I said, are there really some of these guys? He said, oh yeah. I said, how many of them are there? I said, where do you know this, Vince? I mean, who's talking to you? Who's telling you this stuff? And he would never divulge. He was not a braggart. You realize how much he had to brag about? He had contacts. He had people that he knew that were sharing things with him. He would just tell others 50 or 60 of these guys, and not one of them wants you to know who they are. You'll never hear them, you'll never meet them, but there's 50 or 60 of these kind of Mitch Rapp guys that are running around the world trying to defend and protect this country. And he was invited to meet with President Bush in the Oval Office constantly. Bush loved his books. And he would come back and he would make a point, so, you know, I met with President Bush and he brought your name up. And I said, what? He said, well, you probably were mad at him on the Dubai Ports deal. And I said, no, Mr. President, Russia's actually with you on that one, Dubai Ports deal. But he was unaffected by that. He was talking about, yeah, I was with President Bush, but it was never in a braggadocious or a, hey, look what I get to do that you don't get to do kind of thing. It was just effusive appreciation for the life that he had. And he shared it. He loved sharing his passions with people. And that's one of the things that we have in common. So I chalk Vince Flynn up as somebody I hope I'm like when I grow up.
Yeah, indeed, most of us are for sure. I'm going to ask them to go ahead and make sure that we get the mics out there so we can do some Q&A with Rush, so people can ask you stuff, so I don't hog you the whole time. But was it always political talk, or did you guys just run the gamut of your conversation?
Oh no, it was not political. Although the groups of people that we had together, that was the commonality that we all had. That and we were all successful in our fields. You know, that also breeds a certain commonality that affects the way people interact with each other. But no, it wasn't all politics at all. It was a lot of sports. Played golf, and that's where we forgot about all this political stuff and didn't talk about it. It's another thing though about Vince. I never in my life, and I can't say this about anybody else, I never heard him criticize anybody other than a political disagreement, maybe with a politician. But I'm talking about somebody he knew personally, somebody that he had met. Never. In fact, if somebody did begin to criticize somebody that Vince knew, Vince would stand up and defend them. He would do everything he could to defend their honor and tell whoever was being critical, even if it was a lighthearted joke, that they didn't understand it. I've never met anybody more loyal. It's such a shame that he's been taken from us so soon in his life, because he had all of these great characteristics that, I came here for his funeral as stunned, and I shouldn't have been. The depth, the connection that Vince Flynn had with everybody in this town, the respect that people had for him, it was great. I was moved by it. The great things that he did for people, he was just charitable and giving. It's a shame people like that don't get to stay with us longer than they do. But he was just a dream. And you talk about things that we did not address in terms of politics. Some of it was cultural, but he could talk about anything he wanted to talk about and was happy to do so.
Indeed. Not fair that he's gone either. Ladies and gentlemen, questions for Rush Limbaugh? We've got one in the back here to begin with.
Yes, I have one. It's been talked about for a long time about Vince Flynn having a movie coming out. What are your thoughts about that?
Thoughts on the Vince Flynn movie, Rush?
Thoughts on it? Now was one in the works?
There was, and sadly, it was some company called CBS, and they never followed through on it.
CBS, eh? You have an intimate familiarity with
I know
CBS.
some people there, but Vince still got paid, but they never produced it.
Well, you know, here's the thing. I know people that write novels and then they turn them over to screenwriters to write screenplays and they get butchered. I always thought that was a franchise waiting to happen. And I know he was excited by it and thrilled for it. But, you know, this is another thing. A lot of people, I mean, here's this guy from Minneapolis who ends up writing novels and becomes internationally renowned and is hit with the possibility of Hollywood people wanting to make a movie out of his work. And a lot of people in that situation would have, oh yeah, whatever you want. Oh my God, I can't believe it, Hollywood. He stood firm for what he believed in. He didn't want anybody trashing the book, substantially changing it. So he was unaffected by all of that. And I don't know if that's one of the reasons why the movie didn't get made.
Well, you know, we'll ask Sloan Harris, his agent. He's here as well. It's probably even a better question for him. So, yeah, but you're right. I remember having those conversations with him. He did not want it corrupted.
Nope.
He wanted to keep it what he wanted. Anyone else for Rush? Rush Limbaugh, who's traveled 4,000 miles to be here. Anyone have a question for Rush Limbaugh? The real Rush Limbaugh?
Don't worry about it. They're all in awe. They still can't believe that I'm here. No, really, Vince Flynn, I'll tell you a little story. When he told us that he was, and by us I mean this weekend group of friends that got together either every spring or every fall at my house in Florida. When he told us that he had become sick, got sick, we couldn't believe it. And Vince Flynn was Mitch Rapp. He was a rock. Those things didn't happen to Vince. This guy was strapping, he was young, he was strong. None of us could believe it. And the way we found out about it was a little alarming in terms of how far it had spread, but none of us ever doubted that he would beat it. You know, one of the closest friends in our group, person developed a very close relationship with George Brett. George Brett, to this day, still talks about Vince Flynn and his time. And they had a friendship that included, you know, George's son came up here to go into college that Vince got him into. Got him a scholarship, football team at this university. But he would never complain about his illness. He would never focus on it. Whenever we call these things a spring fling or the fall fling, and I think it was one of the fall flings, he said, I don't know if I'm going to be able to make it. I can't play golf. And I said, don't matter if you can play. Everybody wants to see you. Just come right around the golf cart with us. And he did. And when he showed up, you would not have known that he was sick. He didn't look it. He never talked about it. My wife got very ill during the time Vince was sick. She contracted pancreatitis. And pancreatitis is dicey. It can be fatal. There's no cure for it other than to not eat. And if you get it a second time, we almost had an Attorney General of the U.S., John Ashcroft, die from it. She's scared to death. Vince Flynn, as it turns out, with 3 months left in his life, got her into the Mayo Clinic when they had a waiting list of, I don't know how long it was. And he did it. We didn't ask him to do it. I just simply, that's how's Catherine doing? I told him what was going on. Turned out she needed gallbladder surgery and so forth, but she was in the Mayo Clinic for about a month. And after we got home from it, this is 2 months before I got the email about his death. He sends me a note saying, I understand that they didn't treat you all that well at Mayo. And I said, what are you talking about? They could not have been nicer. Who's telling you that? He said, well, good, because I couldn't believe it. So, but point is, selfless. 2 months. Nobody knew, at least none of us did. But here he is worrying about my wife and her health and doing everything he can to move heaven and earth to make sure that she's okay. There aren't too many people you run into in your life like that, and I'm just really thankful and grateful. I met Vince and his whole family and Lisa. It's just been one of those relationships and people you meet through your life you'll never forget and always treasure.
Indeed. Have you had a chance to read The Survivor? Do you have a galley copy? Did you get?
I got my ebook copy last night. I read books on the iPad or the iPhone, and I got my notice and I pre-ordered it. I buy my books. I know I'm a powerful, influential member of the media. Get all this free, but I bought the book, and last night, excuse me, last night I got an alert that it was ready. So I just got it last night, and I read dedication, the first 2 or 3, into the first chapter and so forth. Made me sad. I mean, it's happy, it's sad, it's mixed emotions. But thank God it's there. I mean, somebody picked it up, and I'm going to be really curious to see, writing for somebody else is a very tough thing to do. But I think it's a great project that family agreed to let happen and so forth. So yeah, I'm looking forward to reading it and talking about it and promoting it and selling the heck out of it.
Good for you. Thank you so much for being here. I know you've got a little bit of a cold. It's great to see you. Thank you for doing it. Vince is a loyal friend. I know he'd appreciate your loyalty.
Thank you for including me. I really am honored to be included in this, to be in such rarefied air that Vince Flynn breathed. He really did, folks, and I know all of you here know it. One of the great perks of my own success. I swear this is we're wrapping up. So sometimes I have diarrhea of the mouth, but
you should get a show.
I thought about it. One of the great perks of my success is that I have had the opportunity to meet a lot of people who are the best at what they do. That's inspiring. It's also humbling and sobering. It's a way to keep things in perspective. Study them, see how they work, which is what they do. They all work really hard. Came up here once, family, my wife's brother is married to a woman from here, was here at Christmas time. Vince came, picked me up, get me away from him, save me some time. But he was an inspiration, and meeting people who are the best at what they do is one of the greatest things that's befallen me, happened to me, and he's in that list. So thank you all very much. I'm really happy to be here and share my remembrances with Vince.
Ladies and gentlemen, Rush Limbaugh. You're awesome. What a fun way to start, huh? While we're removing the chairs and getting ready for our next panel, Lisa Flynn had a wonderful idea. If there's anyone out there in the audience who either personally was named as a character in a Vince book, or if you have a family member named in Vince book, please stand up or raise your hand. We want to come over and have you tell us who your character was. We have several people out there with a mic. Joe, you were in the book. Oh, look at all the people. Hang on a minute. We'll get these guys down here. Because Vince loved, so we'll get a couple mics out there. Maybe I'll grab that one. Brian, do you mind grabbing one of those mics and running out? And we'll just have you say your name quickly and who your character was. So where are we? Do you have the mic? Hi.
Hi. I'm Kennedy Flynn, and the character that was named after me is Irene Kennedy.
Awesome. All right, who's next? Val?
All right. In term limits, there was Sam Jarvie, which my maiden name was Jarvie. And then what was Valerie's last name? And she was like the... Yeah, and she was a bitch. Can I say that?
You can say that.
So I had 2 characters.
Vince needed all kinds of characters, so thank you for doing that role. Brian?
Larry Holtz. I was the secretary of the Treasury Holtz, and immediately after I was introduced as a character, I was blown up in a restaurant.
That didn't mean anything, Larry, I'm sure. It's just a character.
Hey, Frank. My brother Mike Vanelli was, I think he called him Tony in the first book, but they went to grade school together in Apple Valley.
Well done. Very cool. There's so many. Yes, sir.
Dennis Gould, Louis Gould, an assassin. Made it to the third book here, and you'll have to read it to find out what happens.
Watch out for the assassin. Very cool. Up in front, Dave.
My name's Gary Erda, and I'm a sales director at Simon & Schuster. So I worked a lot with Vince on the ground, just getting his books out. He named me Jamal Erda, and I was an FBI agent who worked with Mitch Rapp in his books.
Very cool. Who else do we have? Joe?
I was Soucheray, the crazy Frenchman down the alley, and my dog was named Rookie.
I was Joe Barreiro. I was the commie, left-wing Washington Post reporter who got killed off almost immediately in a restaurant bombing, as I recall.
That's what you get for being a print guy, Dan. You should have seen that coming a mile away. Who else do we have?
Hi, I'm Kelly Flynn, and disclosure, I never did talk to Vinny, but he did name a character Kelly. She was like a 64-year-old woman that lived in a farmhouse, and he killed me like 2 pages later. And I really asked myself, was he mad at me? I never asked him because I didn't want to admit that it might have been me.
Right behind Kelly.
I'm Mary Waldvogel. My son, Fritz Waldvogel, was Special Agent Waldvogel, and I think it was American Assassin. And after St. Thomas University, who my son played football for, when they beat St. John's 63-7 in 2011, Vince was so excited. He came down after the game, was so excited with Fritz and said, "You're in my next book."
Tom?
Tom Barnard. My name was, and I wasn't French, by the way. My name was Michelle Bernard. Thanks, Vince.
Yes, sir. Oh, this is a really good one right here. This is fantastic. Do you have the mic?
I do.
Oh, go ahead.
My name's Eric Rapp, and you may have heard of my character, Mitch Rapp. When Vince was bartending at O'Gara's many years ago, I remember the night he leaned across the bar and asked if he minded if he used my name in his book. I think my response was something to the effect of, "You mean that book you're never going to get published? Buy me a Budweiser and we'll call it quits."
Eric, next year you'll get front row being Mitch Rapp.
Hi. Page 127, Memorial Day. Deb Hanasek, bomb demolitionist, and I think my husband would say it was appropriate.
Guys.
Hi, I'm Brian Cruz, and as a follow-up to Eric, I am Mitch Rapp's alias, Mitch Cruz.
I didn't know that, Brian. That's cool.
My name is Carol Culp, and our son Charlie was a kid who, at 3 or 4 years old, was really using inappropriate language. Vince heard the story and put a Charlie in his book. I can't remember which book.
My name is Jim Jetland, and I made a disparaging remark one time to Vince, and he said, "The power of the pen is large and in charge." And in the next book, you're going to be in it, and I was an overweight, belligerent senator from New Mexico.
Serves you right, Jim. And a couple over here, guys, up on the wall.
Hello, my name is Nick Flood, and I was General Flood for, I believe, the first 5 or 6 books. And Vince told me, I think in number 7, I can't remember which one, but he said, yeah, the general is not in this book, just so you know. And of course I complained about that, but he told me, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and it's a 4-year term, and you've been in for 12 years. I've got to retire you at some point.
Well done. Ryan, do we have another one? We'll get the mic over. Oh, go ahead, sir.
Dan Wicker. My character was Charlie Wicker, who was a sniper in, I don't know, 5 or 6 of the books.
Very cool, Charlie. Dan.
Vince was known for his typos, and in The Last Man, my husband is, I think it starts off Brian Schneeman, and then it changes to Bill Schneeman. And he is known for being a smartass, which is very true to my husband. And then also my aunt and uncle are the Americans in Paris, and that's in Killshot. And he dedicated a few chapters to them as a fundraiser for this beautiful space we're in right now. So.
How cool. Well done. Anyone else? It's hard to go. Yes.
Dave Ridley. He was kind enough not to put my father Bill in, but he did put my grandfather Robert. And my mother standing next to me was Vince's godmother.
How great. You got the whole family in there. That's awesome. Yes, sir.
I'm Bob Moeller, and Vince and I shared similar political beliefs, and so, as you know, he had a pretty good sense of humor, so he decided to put me in his book as a Democratic senator, and I thought that'd be pretty funny.
Did you ever forgive him, Bobby?
Yeah, we discussed it. I'm over it.
I'm sure you did. It's hard for me to see with the light. Anybody else? Anybody else? A couple? 2 more. Wow. Lisa, it would have been quicker if we said who wasn't in a Vince Flynn book. Yes, sir.
Yes, I'm Mike McFadden, and I was a hybrid character, Michael O'Rourke, in Vince's first book, Term Limits. And I was the Michael part of that. And then the O'Rourke was after Howard Rourke, who was the main character in Ayn Rand's Fountainhead.
Very nice. Good to see you, Mike. And Brian, where are we at? Oh, yes.
My name is Tom Weber. I am a member of the faculty here, and he used a lot of faculty names in his books over the years. And I was a Tim Weber, a district attorney. And I'm proud to say I was also his English teacher.
You should be proud to say that, for sure. Anybody else? Did we get them all? That was really fun. Great idea, Lisa. Thank you, thank you. Our literary panel now, ladies and gentlemen, we have 3 guests, and again, think of your questions that you'd like to address to them. Please welcome, a Minnesota welcome for all 3 of them. First, Emily Bestler. Emily is the Senior Vice President and Editor-in-Chief of Emily Bestler Books. Emily is Vince's first and only agent. Emily, welcome. Please come on up. Good to see you. Sloan Harris is a partner and co-head of the publication department of ICM Partners, which is a talent and literary agency. Sloan. Hi, Emily. Sloan has been an agent to hundreds of New York Times best-selling authors. He began his career in the mailroom at ICM, which I'm sure if Vince knew, he would have absolutely loved. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Sloan Harris. Good to see you, Sloan. Ladies and gentlemen, Kyle Mills is a New York Times best-selling author of 15 books, including the latest in Robert Ludlum's Covert One series titled The Patriot Attack. Kyle's father was an FBI agent, and you're going to hear a lot more about that during our question and answer session. And because of Kyle's father's job, Kyle grew up in Oregon, Washington, D.C., and London, surrounded by the intelligence and the military community. Currently, Kyle and his wife live in Wyoming, where they spend a lot of their time, off hours, rock climbing, and backcountry hiking. Ladies and gentlemen, a warm STA welcome for Kyle Mills. You know, Kyle, I think it's probably only appropriate to start with you. Congratulations that we're off and running at #2 on the bestseller list, and we hope to get to #1 within a day or two. But what's the response been to you? Because I know that there's It's different to write a Vince Flynn book when Vince isn't here, but how have people responded?
It's been fantastic. I was a little worried at the beginning that people might be skeptical, but I've had nothing but overwhelming support. Everybody really wanted to see Vince's legacy continued, and they loved the Mitch Rapp character and really wanted to see that continue. So it's been, I can't believe I'm going to say this, entirely positive. I haven't had one negative reaction.
Good for you. Congratulations. Emily, how did you find Kyle? How does this process work? It's more common, I think, than people realize.
Well, actually, I would
put that mic a little closer if you don't
I
mind.
would say Sloan was the primary finder of Kyle, but we definitely agreed that he was the perfect person to do this because they have very similar writing styles and similar connections and backgrounds, and it always seemed a natural and true fit.
Sloan, let's take care of this lady's question, but you want to add something to that? Please do.
Okay, I'll address the question in a second, but before I do that, I should say that Kyle is being altogether too humble. The reason this book is as good as it is because Kyle made a extraordinarily deep study of Vince in his books, and Kyle is a humble guy who comes from a family background in law enforcement. And we are remarkably blessed to have someone this talented and this serious about continuing the Mitch Rapp series. So I don't want to let him get away with just saying, "Oh shucks, it's been great so far." It's a lot of hard work.
Kyle, go a little deeper in that process, because I know what you did in terms of how you read and how you studied. Tell people how much Vince left you, how important it was, even though it was a small amount, and then how you kind of extrapolated from there.
Yeah, well, Vince, it turns out, left 3 pages. That's generous. It might be more like 2.5, which I honestly assumed was the tip of the iceberg, and that there would be a huge box of stuff that I would get, outlines and all that. But when I asked for the rest of it, they said that was the rest of it. So obviously Vince and I had very different style of writing, or a process of writing. I write huge outlines and post-it notes everywhere and stuff, and he was one of those guys that liked to just pound it out, which I could never do. So he did leave me, though, The Last Man, his final book, which was clearly it was that storyline was supposed to continue. A lot was wrapped up at the end of The Last Man, but the main plot point was not. And those first 3 pages started recapping The Last Man, so it was really obvious generally where it was supposed to go, which made my life a lot easier.
How many, did you set it up the way you usually do? Did you do the outline? Did you do that whole process? Did you fill in? Did you work back and forth with Emily quite a bit, or how did that work?
Yeah, all of the above. I did a huge outline. I always do. My process is weird. It's to write probably a 35,000 word outline for a 100,000 word book and then not follow it. And it works for me. So we went back and forth quite a bit about where we wanted the series to go, because the thing with thrillers is you can't just say we're going to do the exact same thing, because the world changes and they have to feel current. So with the new challenges facing the world, it evolves a little bit, and where did we want to go with it, and how did we all feel about his books? It's funny how people feel they can all read the same, like nobody reads the same book. And that's very true. It's true of everybody's books. And so how did I see the books? What did I think? What was important to me as a fan? And what was important to them as fans? And we kind of battled it out and came to kind of a framework on how we were going to move forward.
Good for you for keeping the fans in mind. So this is some real there's some serendipity, there's some irony. I think a lot of you remember that Mitch Rapp was created out of the Pan Am 103 Lockerbie bombing when he lost his girlfriend and then made a commitment to kind of fighting terrorism. Tell folks about your real life tie to Pan Am 103.
Well, my father was the head of the FBI in London. It's called the legal attaché. And we were at my college graduation dinner. It was actually in London. And halfway through, his assistant came in and said, a plane just went down in a small town in Scotland, and we think it might just be an accident, but we're not sure yet. And it kind of became clear that it wasn't, and off they went, and we didn't see him again for another 3 months. So he was one of the first people there, and as they were trying to catalog that disaster, and it was really, I think it was, my father had seen a lot in his career, but I think one of the things, it was one of the things that disturbed him most. He would get calls from people to say, look, there's this young couple, and they're sitting in my backyard holding hands, and you got to come get them. And he'd say, we just don't have the manpower. We just have to leave them, and we'll be there as soon as we can. And I don't think he ever really fully got over that.
Sloan, with a character like Mitch Rapp and all these great books, why aren't there 7 great movies about it already?
We could spend all night complaining about Hollywood and we wouldn't even scratch the surface. For any of you, if you've watched either Curb Your Enthusiasm or Entourage, you'll have some idea of the idiocy of that town, which was a source of enormous exasperation for both Vince and me. I will tell you that the movie is not entirely dead. It's still with CBS Films. They are now operating against an excruciatingly tight deadline to start production by April 30th of next year, or we'll get the rights back. And I would predict that what little hair I have and whatever dark hair I have won't be on my head by the time April 30th comes around, but we're still trying really hard. And I think there's actually a fighting chance that it's going to finally happen this time.
Amelia, you need to get on this CBS. Emily, tell folks, I remember talking to Vince a little bit about this, but I don't know if many did. What was it like to do a novel with Vince Flynn? Because, I would see him, write this thing daily in the summer, and it was just fascinating to me.
Funny you should say that about the summer, because as everybody in-house knows, Vince and deadlines were not best friends. So I'm pretty sure my children will back me up on this. Not one family vacation in the summer was unaccompanied by FedEx packages of chapters from Vince, and everybody saying, Mom, so I gotta do this. We've got 2 seconds to publish this book now. But we actually had a lot of fun working on the books, and Sloan was a big part of that as well. Just the back and forth of the editing process, and he was wonderful to edit, and he loved that bit too. And talking about Sloan and Vince and I would hash out, oh, is that too violent? For example, I remember once, Sloan, you found something just heinously, awfully, extremely violent and unacceptable. And I said, well, you're kidding. I loved that scene. So we kept that one. Vince loved it too. Anyway, he was an absolute joy to edit, an amazingly creative and responsive talent.
Very nice. I'm going to open up to questions here in just a moment, but anything else that any of you want to share or want us to know that's important, either about Vince or tonight or the book?
Well, one thing I would really like to say, I work at a great big company with a lot of colleagues and a lot of very famous, fancy people coming through our hallways all the time, and it is an understatement to say that when Vince Flynn was in the hallways, it was the biggest event of the year. And it wasn't just because he was successful, it was because his charisma and generosity were so enormous. He knew the names of every assistant in our department. These are people who are really well educated and underpaid. And he would take the girls out for drinks. Emily witnessed some of this on a couple of occasions. And there's just no way I can put into words the degree to which he was beloved in our hallways, and never spoiled by his success either. And I know those of you who knew him really well will understand what I'm saying here, but most of the people we work with tend to get spoiled by success, and that never happened to Vince.
And yeah, he was a superstar who never acted like one. He was a superstar, but he never acted like one.
That's exactly right. He was in a teeny tiny small pantheon of the most successful authors in the world, and still never lost his common touch, no matter how well he did.
Just to add to that point, it's the exact same thing when Vince would come in to visit us at Simon & Schuster, and tonight, just to say, his paperback publisher, Louise Burke, is here, and Judith Kerr, his hardcover publisher, Michael Selleck, the head of sales, Gary Erta, his longtime fan and friend and seller of many hundreds of thousands of copies of his book, and they would all vouch for the exact same experience with Vince.
Well, good. Kyle, any thoughts? Anything you want to share, or should we just open it up?
I think you just open it up. I'll leave it at that.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, questions for Kyle, Emily, or Sloan? Yes, sir. We'll get a mic run over to you right up here in front. You have a question already in the back? We'll get yours next. Why don't we go here in the back?
Thank you, Mr. Mills, for carrying on the Mitch Rapp stories. I think everybody here is very excited about it. But how about another challenge? How about a biography about Vince Flynn? I know he struggled with dyslexia, and a guy from St. Paul who bartended at O'Gara's got to hang out with the President of the United States. I think that's pretty great. And he also wrote 14 bestsellers. So how about a biography about Vince?
Oh. So the question was, I know it's hard to hear. What about a biography of Vince Flynn? Is that right? Considering all that Vince went through with dyslexia and the struggles he had to become this world-famous author.
I think it's an amazing idea, and all you have to do is look around this room or go any place in the Twin Cities to see how many people felt totally inspired by Vince. I think it's actually a really lovely idea, and I hadn't come up on it on my own, but it's certainly something we'll have to think about.
Good point. The Simon & Schuster guy in front is texting someone right now, by the way. I don't know what that means. Could have a draft in a week. The question was right here.
Kyle, you write in somebody else's voice, so which one of you checks that voice and make sure that that writing style, that the timbre of Vince comes through?
It wasn't too bad for me. Sorry about my voice, by the way. Nobody asks authors to talk, and I've been doing a lot, and it's going on me a bit. It's kind of interesting, and it's interesting that I got this job because I don't necessarily write like Vince. My process was really different than his, but also my books are really different than his. It's still in the thriller genre, obviously, but because I don't, it's very easy to notice when I'm slipping into writing my own book about Vince's characters. I think if I had been a person that wrote, about, a CIA hitman or very military type books, it would have been really difficult. But there were definitely chapters that I wrote that I thought, haha, that's a great chapter. Because authors tell themselves that a lot. And then I realized, no, it was a good Kyle Mills chapter, but it's a really kind of lousy Vince Flynn chapter. And I tossed them. And also as a fan, I've read all his books, and there's something, those books, you knew what you were going to get, and it's what you wanted. And so I didn't want to change it, and I hope I didn't. I hope it's hard to tell what he wrote and what I wrote.
Anyone else? Yes, we'll run a mic over to you. We have the mic in the back? Thanks, go ahead.
We've all read about Vince when he went to D.C., for instance, and hung out at Langley, and the information he got from his connections there, and any light you can shed about those relationships and the information he gleaned and how he used it in his books. And it all seemed so rooted in reality and real information.
The question was, Vince's books were so realistic when it came to the information he knew, and this gentleman knew that he hung out in D.C. and Langley and other places. Can you shed any light on that? And I also know that I think Tim and some other people might talk about that later.
I can shed a certain amount of light, but as somebody mentioned earlier, Vince was very, very protective of his sources. But he did have them, and from the very top levels of government, he was often cautioned to be careful how he used them. And from the very top levels of government, he would get questions such as, how in God's name did you find that out? So that was one of the reasons why his books rang so true, because so much of it really was true.
Emily, when was that? I mean, was that at book 2, or did it take till book 7 before you started seeing that kind of stuff? Because, I remember interviewing Vince on my show in 1998 going, really? A bunch of terrorists are going to try to attack Washington, D.C., please, And, I mean, he was so far ahead of the curve.
I think that the more famous he became, the more important his audience became, in terms of the Washington insiders who would then be slightly horrified by what they were reading. And I remember once, and I think it was probably 3 or 4 books into it that it began to be a real phenomenon. And I remember once I'm not sure which novel, but he had a small submarine going up the Potomac with a nuclear device attached, and I believe it was the FBI had a complete nervous breakdown because, as they said, they'd never thought of that, and that was a really good idea.
Wow. Yes, ma'am.
There's a scene in Term Limits that I love, where the 2 senators are walking down the abandoned street and the news cameras are watching them, and it stuck with me since I read that book. Is there a scene or a particular chapter for the 3 of you that you remember so well about a book and just love?
Did you guys hear that? Okay, did everyone else hear that? They're wondering about some scenes or chapters that really struck them. She was struck by one in Term Limits.
I hate to give such a lame answer, but there was a scene like that in every book Vince ever wrote. I certainly remember the scene where Rapp's wife was killed in a execution gone awry, which was, by the way, not an uncontroversial decision at the time, and that's something that's really stuck with me as a married guy and a father. But the truth of the matter is, he had this amazing capacity to find these dramatic moments sort of out of the blue, where every single time he delivered one of his books, I had at least a couple or 3 of those kinds of epiphany moments. And I know that's a generic answer, but it's the only one I've got.
I kind of agree. It's hard to pick one scene. Those things stick with me. And of course, I read them all. I read the whole series straight through. Been about 2 years ago. So everything's really fresh in my mind. I would say probably the scene that sticks with me the most, for a number of reasons, was, not to give it, I assume everybody's read all the books, right? Is when Mitch spares Louis Gould's life and the life of his family. I thought that was really well done.
Kyle, Sloan, Emily, thank you very, very much. We appreciate you carrying on Vince's legacy the way you have. It means a lot to a lot of people who are fans. I think it probably means more to a lot of people in this room. So thanks for making the effort to be here, and congratulations. So the third panel we call our Friends and Family panel, and it consists of Tim Flynn. Tim's the youngest of 7 kids. He graduated from this fine institution in 1988, and he attended the University of St. Thomas in 1992. Did you get a master's degree as well? Has anyone seen it? Okay. Vince, it was not in broadcasting. Tim has worked for the City of St. Paul Police Department since 1996. At the time he was promoted to commander, he was the youngest person ever to be promoted to commander, and I knew that because your brother was so proud of you and told us all. Currently, Tim Flynn Tim Flynn is the commander of the FBI Safe Streets Task Force and also the commander of the St. Paul SWAT team. Good to see you, Tim. Ladies and gentlemen, Tom Tracy is vice president for the Excelsior Group. Prior to joining that organization, he spent 18 years with Cushman & Wakefield. He was named the MCAR Broker of the Year in 2013. Tom grew up in St. Paul. He's a graduate of the University of Notre Dame, More importantly, when he was 14 years old, he met a kid named Vince Flynn right in this very school, and we'll ask Tom about that a little bit later on. Tom, it's great to have you here. Tom Barnard is the winner of the 2006 Marconi Award for Large Market Personality of the Year, and of course, Tom is the host of the KQ Morning Show. Tom, great to see you. Come on up. Dan Barreiro is a sports talk show host at KFAN. Barreiro was a sports columnist at the Star Tribune for 17 years after previously working for the Dallas Morning News. And like Tom, and the two Toms, actually, Dan was named as a character in the book. So, Dan, welcome. Good to have you here. Good to see you. Joe Soucheray was born in St. Paul. He entered the media as a sports journalist, beginning work as a sports reporter for the Minneapolis Tribune back in 1973. Joe joined the St. Paul Pioneer Press in the mid-'80s and eventually, as you know, became a columnist that we still read today. He began hosting his daily Garage Logic Drive Time radio show on KSTP in April of 1993. Joe Soucheray. Good to see you, Joe. So everyone here, Tim, is there a character named after you? Because these guys all have characters named after them.
Well, it's funny
you got to pull that thing really close when you talk, guys.
In the first book, Michael O'Rourke's brother's name was Tim O'Rourke. But the character Mitch Rapp was born in 1970, is my height, weight, physical description, and we share the same skills. So, Eric, he's got your last name, but...
Everyone bought it. They believe you. Tim, let's stay with you. We were talking earlier. What was it about your brother that made him get access to these people and that drew people in? And you heard Rush talk, and you heard about these stories from Sloan, the way he just treated everybody. What was Vinny Flynn like that gave him access to all this stuff?
I would say Vince's charisma and his ability to make people feel comfortable and open up was absolutely amazing. And one time I got to witness it firsthand that many of you can probably remember on 2 occasions America's #1 team, SEAL Team 6, came here and trained with St. Paul SWAT team and Minneapolis SWAT team. So this is the opportunity for me to impress Big Brother. These are got a handful of America's #1 team here. We're going to go over to Vince's house and they're going to smoke cigars and have scotch with Vince. And these guys aren't supposed to talk about anything. They're never, all these books that were written back then when this was happening, none of these guys would ever talk about mission-specific details. We were at Vince's house, and with under 5 minutes, Vince had these guys telling their life story about how many people they killed, what missions they were on. They were on the Bin Laden raid. They were on the Save Captain Phillips. They were telling Vince information that they weren't supposed to tell anyone. And his ability to make them open up and tell him that was amazing. And speaking of Special Forces, I have to mention someone asked a chapter that sticks out in your mind on one of the books. And all of you need to do this. Study the Bin Laden raid. Because when Bin Laden was killed, I immediately went to all the books and I started looking through them and I said, I know this isn't one of the books, I know it. Now Bin Laden, I think the Bin Laden raid happened in 2010. Memorial Day came out in like 2003 or 2004, and if you'll find in chapter 3 or 4, Mitch Rapp and a group of special forces go in dark in helicopters into Pakistan without letting Pakistan know they're there, and they take out a high-value target. It's almost verbatim how it happened in the Bin Laden raid, and it almost got to the point where like military leaders are having their tacticians read some of these novels to get ideas, as Emily had said. Combination of that and he knew, and he was very good at connecting the dots. He'd get a little piece of information from one person here, in one military community, one intelligence community, and he'd be able to connect the dots.
He was brilliant at it, for sure. You not buying that, Tom? Why are you rolling your
No,
eyes?
I just, no more yes or no answers. Thanks, Tim. I got to be on the air in like 10 minutes.
And if you listen to him this morning, I'll give you his number so you can text him at 2 in the morning.
Yeah, somebody texted me at 2 o'clock, 2:20 and 2:40, wrong number. They had dialed the wrong number. I was supposed to go at 2:20 in the morning to somebody I don't know's house to drink scotch, smoke a cigar, and play bocce.
Did you take them up on it?
No. I took something up, though. So I've been awake since 2. That's great. What else you got, Tim?
Hey, Tommy, tell us a great story about meeting Vince Flynn here. How old were you guys? What was it like? And how did that friendship start? I love this, and I think it should be shared.
I'm not talking to you either.
I know.
What was your question again?
This guy, Tom Tracy.
Tom Tracy. Oh, you got
Yeah, absolutely. So
I got others for you.
Goes back to August 1980, and like a lot of guys coming to St. Thomas Academy, I didn't know one person when I walked into this school for my first day of football practice. I had just moved here from Baltimore, Maryland, literally knew no one. So we went through the week of football practice. It got to be the first Friday, and Vince, a kid who I'd met on the football field, comes to school. He had the largest red bag over his shoulder when he walked into school that you've ever seen. Huge duffel bag. It was like a hockey bag. And he was basically going around saying, I've got all my stuff and I'm looking for some place to stay overnight for the weekend so I don't get stranded in Apple Valley where I live, so I can go to the varsity football game tonight. So I'm kind of watching this kid with the big bag walk around. I'm finally like, he's got no place to go. Fine, he can come to my house. I don't know anybody. And as they say, the Lord works in mysterious ways. I feel really fortunate that I picked, that I said, come to my house, because that's kind of the way it all started. And for 33 years, he was my best buddy. Absolutely my best buddy every day for 33 years. That's how it went down.
Tommy B, and I throw this out to Joe and Dan too. What made him such a good guest to have? Tom, you've done hundreds of thousands of interviews. Rush never interviews anybody.
He didn't do that many. No one's done 100,000 interviews.
That's a lot of interviews.
It is a lot of interviews.
How many interviews have you done, Tom?
How many what?
8 or 9 interviews.
Now we're going to be in the middle of a radio fight right now. This is fantastic. Tom, Bernard's done at least 3 or 4 interviews.
What do they think?
Yeah. So anyway, what made him such a great guest?
What's he know? No, he doesn't know anything.
What was the question again?
TV guys are prone to exaggeration.
Hey, by the way, let me ask you a question.
What made Vince such a great guest to have on your show?
None of your business. No, he could talk about anything at any time. Honest to God, I love the guy. You know that. He just could talk about anything. First of all, kudos to Joe Soucheray, because Joe had him on before anybody had him on.
That's right. Yeah.
That's a fact. And Vince was always very loyal. He said, Tom, I will definitely come on your show. Dan, come on your show, but I got to go on Joe's first.
Yep.
That's why I love Vince Flynn, because he never forgot what Joe did for him.
Joe, tell that story for people who don't know. Explain
I'm not going to tell it. I got a guy here who's going to tell it. But let me say one thing first. Is Mary Ann Grossman in the building? And if she is, would she stand or wave? Is Mary Ann Grossman here?
She's on the back on the upper
Somebody
railing.
say yes, please.
She's way up balcony. Look on the balcony.
Mary Ann Grossman is the longest tenured reviewer of books in the Twin Cities. She writes for the Pioneer Press, and no one has written more words about Vince Flynn's books or critiqued more of Vince Flynn's books than Mary Ann Grossman. Okay, I'm going to tell you how it began, but I'm not going to tell you. Rook, get up here.
Uh-oh,
Rook, get up here, quick. And the clock is running, so don't do your Rook stuff. Let's just tell the straight story.
Tom, Dan, did you bring sidekicks or the rest of your crew?
Unbelievable.
Yeah, I did.
No, I forgot. Well, actually, he is here somewhere.
Tell him how it began.
I don't know where.
And why he was so loyal to us.
I don't remember.
Make it up if you have to.
First and foremost, now that Rush is gone, and it's too bad that he's not here, because he said Vince never ripped a guy, was never critical. He never saw Vince with any Cretan guys. I'll tell you right now, I think it's down the hall and to the left. He would have told me...
You're going to regret this.
He would have told me. You said keep it short, but the floodgates are open. He would have said, "You didn't shave, your jacket's too tight, you can lose 20 pounds, what's wrong with you?" That's exactly what Vince would say to me tonight. So since he wasn't here, Tim said it the first 5 minutes that I came into the gymnasium. I knew Vince in high school. I was never best friends with him. I was never, buddies with him. But the Cretan and St. Thomas people kind of hung out together. I worked at the Highland Theater as a freshman. I was pretty advanced for my age. So I would go to some of the same screenings and the same parties that these 83, 4, and 5 grads were at. So I knew him from there. Then when he worked up at Plum's, I worked at Monday Night Sports Talk. After, from midnight to 1, I would go over there with a friend of mine named Mike Zipko. Vince was tending bar, and he would say, "Listen, you got to get this manuscript to Souch." I said, "Everybody has stuff for Soucheray. He doesn't have enough time to read it." He just said, "Please do it, please do it." So one day, he gave me a manuscript that was about 1.5 inches thick, and the name of it was The Right to Rise Up. That was the name of that was the manuscript that he presented Souch with. Anyway, the rest is history. We don't take any credit for any of his success. I think we should. No, we don't. We don't take. But it was nice because he's had 60 rejection letters. My kid graduated from St. Thomas last year, the academy here. He betrayed me as a Cretan kid, and he had a great experience here. He took the test for placement here at St. Thomas that automatically made Cretans send a rejection letter. Oh, Vince was all over that with Danny McQuillan and all the Cretan guys going, "Mikulski's kid can't even get into Cretan. What the hell's going on here?" My son didn't want to go at that point. Vince told him, "Matthew, this is your first rejection letter of your life. Frame it, put it on your wall. Every time you get up to go to St. Thomas Academy, look at that and let that be your motivation." And he did. And he had a great time here at St. Thomas Academy, I'm happy to say. Some of the emails I got from Vince over the years, one talking about his treatment, etc., it always ended with, "How's Matthew doing at St. Thomas? Does he like it?" Anyway, he was a great guy. I miss him. Probably not more than his family does. I can't look at Lisa or I'll start bawling like a baby. But anyway, that's it. So.
Hey, Dan Barreiro, you had phenomenal conversations with him and you had him on for long periods of time. I mean, it wasn't like...
I would have kept him on for a whole show if you'd allowed it. I'm sure you guys, the rest of the panel that's had him on, can relate to this. What I appreciated the most about him was you could go several months without having him on, and then he'd come in studio, and it would be as seamless as if we had just had a conversation the day before. I mean, I told him he obviously didn't need the extra work. He could have been I think he would have been a terrific talk show host. I really do. I mean, just a great communicator. And again, I wasn't there at the beginning of it, but once he got good, he didn't need to go on with any of us. I mean, let's be honest. This
Did you
guy...
ever meet a guy who could drop a name better than he could?
No.
He could say he had dinner with the King of Jordan, and it was like he walked down the alley to have a burger with somebody.
That's true.
Yeah.
And he was so natural at what he did, and he was loyal. I mean, like I said, he didn't need us at that point. He didn't need to be on with us at all, and he still made it a point of doing that. And as he got sicker and sicker, it was then you're in that issue. You want to reach out to him, but you also don't want to get in the way. It became a very complicating situation. And for me, speaking for me, there's just certain guests I've had. You can't. He's one of them. He's irreplaceable. You just can't get that same feeling again. And to that extent, I very much to this moment feel that loss. I really do.
I hear it. Tim, talk a little bit about, when Emily was up here, I thought of you because she said, so there's people in government going, how does he know this? What's going on? That actually happened at the Oval Office.
I believe the year was around 2005 or 2006. Vince had been on at the time, Governor Tim Pawlenty's radio show. I don't know if the governor is in the crowd, but they were good friends, great supporter of Vince. On a break in the radio show, the discussion came up about, at the time, President Bush. And Vince said he'd be honored to meet President Bush someday. And Governor Pawlenty at the time said, well, he's actually coming to town next month, and we're going to have a receiving line for him that you've all seen on TV. At the bottom of the stairwell, it's usually a veteran and some other people that are tied into the community that meet the president as he gets off the plane. So, and Vince at the time had some contacts in local Secret Service, and I had some contacts, and I had contacted them and to see if, you know, Vince could maybe be introduced to the president. They said, you know, no, it's not going to happen. So Governor Pawlenty got Vince in the reception line, and as they're coming off the plane, Laura Bush, the First Lady, came off first. She got to the end of the line, recognized Vince, she said, from his jacket covers, and said, "Oh, the president can't wait to meet you. He's a huge fan of yours." And at this time, Vince he still didn't have any idea that the president had been reading his books, let alone that he's approved of them and was a fan of them. President comes through the receiving line. He sees Vince, puts him in a bear hug, says, "I'm a huge fan of yours," points to the limousine and says, "How would you like to ride with me to the next event?" So, and you think politically at the time here, and Tim Pawlenty's stock was on the rise in the Republican Party. The governor thought this was going to be a moment for him to be in Stagecoach 1 with the president to talk about his future political aspirations between MSP and the 3M headquarters in Maplewood. What happened that time in the car was the president grilling Vince about his information and where he gets it from. And Vince would describe the route to me, and we're driving down the route, and the president's looking out the window. He said, "You know, Vince, the stuff you write in your books, it's like you're in the room with us when we're making these decisions. I just don't know where you get your information." And from there, they get to this 3M event, and the president goes out one side of the limousine. The First Lady goes out the other side with Vince, and the First Lady says, "Vince, you know, big fan of yours. Annually, we have a literacy fair in Austin. I'd like you to come down and speak to the literacy fair." He's very appreciative of it, says, "Absolutely, I'll be there for you." And then at the time, it was either Andrew Card or one of the press secretaries approached Vince and said, "Vince, the president, I'm not kidding, he's a big fan of yours. Next time you're in D.C., he wants to sit down with you." And he doesn't say that to everyone, so he sent me over here to get your personal information. When you're in D.C. next time, he wants to meet with you. So a couple months later, Vince is traveling to D.C. for the retirement of a friend of his who's in the CIA, and he contacts Andrew Card, and he tells him that you know, the president has this hour open at this time of the day, and Vince says, "That's not going to work. I'm busy." So he was able to adjust his schedule. And first of all, how this story was told to me, I was working at a bank off duty, and Vince called me and said he needed a ride from 3M. Well, I'm like, "How did you get there?" "I rode with the president, but I need you to come pick me up." Like, you got to be kidding me. So he goes out to D.C., and they make some time for him. He sat down in the Oval Office with the president for about an hour and a half, and they talked about family, they talked about domestic policy, foreign policy, and again, he was so charismatic and engaging that he got, you know, the president, you know, of the United States to open up to him, created a great relationship between Vince and Lisa and the First Lady, and they went out there several times to visit with the president.
Very cool.
I would like to add, that was probably the worst President Bush impersonation I've ever heard in my life, by the way. You said something like, "How about chapter 3? What's in 4?
But other than that, it was a great story. It was fantastic.
Was he on the schedule to be on the panel?
No, he was not. And he ate up a huge chunk of time.
As long as you're at it, talk about your hair product sponsor.
When you got this much, you want to make sure it looks good, okay?
I promise, in Vince's spirit, we keep it interesting. We're not talking about rookies' hair plugs. Think about your questions real quickly for these guys, for anyone in particular or just in general. But you guys, any thoughts that you want to share briefly before we open it up to everybody?
Well, the other quick thing I wanted to mention is in the period of time since the word broke that the series was going to be continued and Kyle was going to write it, the number of emails and, you know, on Twitter accounts that I follow from people who, I mean, this is personal stuff to them. The relationship they've established with this character is real to them. And that's a great credit, obviously, to any writer, but it's especially a great credit to what Vince had created. I mean, that's why I think people were watching so closely. And I talked to Kyle earlier tonight about, man, that's a lot of pressure, because they're they're going to judge you. And I think they're going to be very pleased, and a lot of them have already have said that. But that's, I think, also a great credit to him that this was more than just another book or another. This was a character that people took into their hearts that meant something to them, especially, I think, but not exclusively, military people as well. And that's the greatest compliment I think you can give a writer.
Indeed.
The words inappropriate in American culture have replaced the words right and wrong. For Vince, it remained right and wrong.
Yeah, there was never a lot of gray area. It was awfully black or awfully white. Tom?
You know, I'd like to take the opportunity actually to apologize for something with Vince, and unfortunately he's not here for the apology, but I was actually living with him with a couple other guys when he went into his boss at United Properties, Boyd Stouffer, and said, I'm quitting my job and I'm going to be writing a novel. And Boyd later told me, then I subsequently worked for Boyd, and he told me, you know, I thought the guy was cracked and he'd be back in 2 weeks. I was living with him at the time, and Vince didn't have a lot of money. He was an author and a bartender, so he went out to get a desk, and the desk was a door from Menards. And he put it in his bedroom, and he stacked up returnable beer bottles underneath it, cases, and that was his desk. So one of his roommates actually thought that was funny, and while Vince was bartending one night, went to the store and got a doorknob and actually mounted it on the door, on his desk, I should say. And Vince wanted to know who did it, and I said I didn't do it. I swore I didn't do it. I actually did it. I did it.
Way to come clean in Vincent J. Flynn Hall. Way to go. I know that's been bothering you. Tommy B?
One of my favorite things about Vince was several years ago, my phone rang, and I looked at the caller ID, and it said Vince Flynn. And I answered the phone, and I said, Vince, how are you? He goes, hey, Tom, what's up? And I said, you know what? I love when I see your name on the caller ID on my phone. He goes, why? I said, because I know you never want anything. He never wanted anything from me ever. He just called to see how I was. Everybody else came first with him. It was a phenomenal, it was just a great feeling. He called, and it wasn't because I need this or I need that or blah, blah, blah. He never wanted anything. He was just a great friend. He really was.
Questions for our friends and media panel.
Got one up in the bleachers.
Up in the bleachers, over here to the left.
Well, what a panel. First, I want to just say I listened to, read, or something with all you guys. And you had interviewed Vince a lot, and I was wondering, had he ever expressed who he thought should play Mitch Rapp in a movie?
Did you guys hear that? Did Vince, any idea, did Vince ever mention to anyone on the panel who should play Mitch Rapp in a film?
We never talked.
I don't remember.
Wasn't his brother?
I think he did, but I don't remember the name. The thing that was frustrating for him was, you heard some of it earlier tonight, was just dealing with Hollywood. You know, the whole idea that in effect, at some point, you have to decide whether you're just going to take the check because you're going to lose a hell of a lot of control over it, and it may not even end up being anything close to what you think the character is, and that's just usually the reality in dealing with Hollywood and his own frustrations with that.
He did mention Chris Hemsworth to me once.
Oh, did he?
Yeah, he did. And I said, he's an Aussie, forget it.
Yeah. Eric Bana.
Yeah, Eric Bana.
I remember his name. Vince mentioned his once as well. Anyone else? Yes, in the orange, or do we have the mic nearby for you? We'll try to get it right up in the middle. If you have a question, raise your hand now, and we'll get one of the mics to you so we can kind of go quickly and do it ahead. But yes, ma'am.
I'm wondering if Vince ever talked to any of you about ever running for political office.
I didn't hear that.
I didn't either.
Would Vince ever be interested in running for political office? I think not.
No.
I'd say no, yeah.
I'd say
I don't
no.
think he had any, yeah.
Timmy?
Too smart.
Yeah.
Should we
couldn't afford it?
You know, I would just add one thing on that. You know, one of the huge disappointments, I think, for Vince was that he was not around when Mike McFadden ran for the U.S. Senate last year. Mike was just a fabulous friend to Vince, starting in college all the way through, was right with him at the very end. And Vince would have been so excited to help out on that, and I think just very instrumental in that. And it was a huge disappointment, for all of us who knew Vince, that he could not be around for that because it was so exciting.
But I remember Vince saying to me before, that he was so proud of Mike and all the things that he had done. So, yeah. And Mike, I know you know that, but it is a shame he wasn't around for your race. Anyone else? The far side bleachers. Yes, sir.
Thank you all very much for being here. I just became part of the STA community about 5 years ago. I was assigned here as chaplain. And everybody would talk to me about Vince and many times about his faith. Could you say some things about his faith and how his faith carried him through the many difficult times that he had, certainly in his life, especially those who knew him on the younger years and as he grew through his time here at STA and up to the end?
Did you hear that, gentlemen? Vince's faith, how it grew, how it kept him through some difficult times, how his faith kind of evolved while he was here at STA.
I have reason to believe that he was very faithful, but I don't want to go into it.
All right.
We would have fun with it because I'm a confirmed agnostic, and so he would give me crap about that from time to time. We'd have, this was before he got ill, and we'd have some pretty good conversations on air and sometimes off air about religion, and he'd kind of chide me about the agnostic thing. But clearly, most people know here, certainly people know him well, just how powerful faith was for him and how much he continued to cling to that as he was ill. And the few times I did talk to him then, that's something he would talk to and say, look, in fact, he said it on air the last few times I had him on, that's what he held on to. That was his strength.
No question. Whenever I would say things on the air, I know that he would call me, sir, and say, Jesus, Mary, and Joseph. Well, that had to mean something, right?
Guys?
Vince, he was very involved in the Catholic community, in the leadership in the local Catholic church, and all the way up till the end, his motto was keep the faith. And everyone who was around him all the way up till the end, none of us believed he was going to pass because of his faith. And that faith was exuded through those around him and those that were close to him. Constantly keep the faith till the moment it happened. I still didn't believe it was going to. I still don't believe it did happen, that he passed away. But because of his faith is why we all believed. I mean, he was kind of he owned the room. Dan, not to bring light to it, but the intro to Dan's show every day is, how does it feel to be the smartest person in the room every day? And he was. And that's because that was his thought, and keep the faith. We all believed him, and we'd do anything for him, and it was his faith that kept him hanging on.
I would just say that a lot of people learned a lot about faith from Vince at the end. It's very tough seeing somebody 47 years old pass away, but he was so peaceful when he died that you knew he had faith. He was totally comfortable and totally calm, and that's what I learned from him.
Anybody else before we sign off? Question while we have these guys here? Anything else? Okay. Gentlemen, thanks a million. Appreciate you being here. You can go ahead and stay there for a second.
Before we go, Frank, I don't have a question. Oh, hey, just shut up for once. I'm just going to read a quick email.
Hey, Joe.
I got about 4 pages here. I'm going to read a quick email. What's that?
You're going to read that whole thing?
No.
That's highlighted?
No.
Yeah, hey, you know what? I just learned something.
No, this was sent to us after we lost Vince, but it's a snapshot in time of what he did to someone. This guy says, I live in Littleton, Colorado. Vince usually showed up every 4 years on a book tour. This time I went to his first time I went to his book signing, I gave him 2 Cuban cigars, and he signed a copy of my book. Forward another 4 years at a book signing in Colorado, I emailed Vince publicist David Brown and offered to buy him a steak dinner for David and Vince the night of the book signing event. David replied back that Vince would not have time for dinner, but he might possibly have time for a beer after. That night he signed my book. I told him my name and he said, "Oh, you're Jody." He stuck out his hand and said, "Great to meet you." Then he said, "I remember you from the last signing here. You gave me a couple cigars." I nodded. We talked for a little bit. He asked if I'd stick around for a beer after. After the event, we went to an Irish pub. He thought this guy was going to infringe on Vince and his friend. Vince said, "Don't worry about it. These are my friends. I want you to meet my friends." As the hostess put some tables together, the waitress came over, started to take drink orders. When she got to me, I quietly handed her a $100 bill. The last dollar bill to my name as business was bad for me in '09. I discreetly motioned around everyone else to get settled and would start a tab for us. She went away. A few minutes later, a different waitress brought us our drink orders and asked if we were hungry. Vince and I shared a 2 corned beef sandwich special with fries. We were going to split it. About an hour and a half later, it was time to leave. The waitress brought the check over. I motioned for it. Vince's friend grabbed it before I could and pulled out his credit card. That must not have been you, Tom.
Oh, God, you're funny.
I was able to see the bill in his hand, and it did not contain a $100 credit. The bill was $135. I motioned to the waitress that was there and said, "I gave the first waitress a $100 bill, and there's no credit." Well, the waitress and the guy whispered to each other. Vince looks over at the waitress and the guy and says, "What's he trying to get your number? What's going on here?" The waitress very sarcastically said, "No, this guy says he gave the other waitress a $100 bill to start a tab. And there's no $100 bill on this tab." Vince looked at her in the eye and said, "If he said he gave you a $100 bill, he did. He's not going to lie to you." It goes on, and the gist of the matter is, he had a manuscript for Vince to read. Vince took the manuscript, looked at it, and when he sent it back, I think his mom looked at it. Inside the manuscript was a $100 bill that Vince had sent back to this guy, fully knowing that this guy was telling the truth. And it's just, there's no cameras, there was no radio guys, there was no press or anything like that. That just shows the character of a guy that we already know has great character, and I'm just happy that I got to be part of his life.
He's hugging me from behind. I don't know why. Matt, any housekeeping? Anything else we have to do? Hey, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for being in Vincent J. Flynn Hall tonight. Thanks for supporting Survivor. Panel, thanks to you. Thanks to our first panel. Thanks to Rush Limbaugh. And hopefully by tomorrow, Survivor goes from number 2 to number 1, and we can all have a big smile thinking about Vince and all these great stories we heard about him tonight. So, thank you.